Chapter 37. In Search of Drax. "What on earth is that?" Marcia demanded crossly, quickly forgetting how relieved she had been the night before to see Septimus and Jenna back safely. But Marcia was not feeling her best. She had woken to see the shadow lounging on her pillow. This was not unusual, for over the past few months the shadow had been growing more visible, especially first thing in the morning, but it had always been silent until that moment. What had actually woken Marcia was the sound of a low, sepulchral voice calling her name over and over. "Marcia, Marcia, Marcia." In a fit of anger, Marcia had thrown one of her best purple python shoes at the ghastly thing, but the shoe had, of course, gone straight through it. The shoe had shot across the room and smashed a small glass pot that Arthur had given Marcia, when, as his apprentice, she had finally mastered a particularly difficult projection. The broken pot had upset Marcia more than she expected, and she had stormed downstairs in a bad temper. She had had quite enough of the shadow, she decided, as she threw open the kitchen door and yelled at the coffee pot, "To get a move on, will you?" After breakfast she decided she would go straight down to old Weasel and insist on getting the stopper, the very last piece of the shadow safe, immediately. "Septimus," said Marcia in a loud voice. Septimus sat up with a start, and for a moment could not remember where he was. Marcia soon reminded him. "The Wizard Tower," she said, folding her arms crossly, "is a place of magic, not a menagerie." "What?" asked Septimus. "Look at my best blankets, full of holes. I don't know where you found that giant moth, but you can take it straight back." "What giant moth?" asked Septimus, wondering if he'd missed something. "Huh?" mumbled Jenna, emerging from under the pile of blankets. "Oh, hello, Jenna," said Marcia. "Nice to see you back." The rat said, "Well, that wretched rat said a lot of things, most of it rubbish as far as I can tell, but he did say that you made it to the midsummer visit. Well done." "Thank you," said Jenna sleepily. She sat up and stuck her foot through a large hole in the blanket. She wiggled her toes as if surprised to see them, and suddenly something green pounced. "Ouch!" she yelled. "Spitfire!" gasped Septimus, taken aback. Aunt Zelda had told him that the dragon would grow in sudden spurts, but he had not expected this. Spitfire had eaten his way out of the dragon-proof bag, and was now the size of a small dog. Septimus grabbed hold of the dragon and pulled him off Jenna's foot. "You all right, Jen?" he asked. "Yes, I think so. Still got 10 toes." Jenna rubbed her foot, which was a little scratched from the dragon's claws. "Sep," she said, looking at Spitfire, whose small green tongue was flicking over Septimus's hand, hoping for breakfast. "He wasn't as big as that last night, was he?" "No," muttered Septimus. He could tell this was going to be trouble, and he hardly dared look at Marcia. He knew what she would say, and sure enough, she said it. "I told you, Septimus. No pets. No parrots, no iguanas, no tortoises, no— But Spitfire is not a pet. He's a magical tool, like the practice rabbit in the courtyard." "Septimus, a dragon is nothing like a practice rabbit. You have no idea of the trouble." As if to prove Marcia right, Spitfire wriggled out of Septimus's grasp and made a beeline for Marcia's feet. He had spotted the purple python shoes. Something in Spitfire's ancient dragon memory had just told him that dragons and snakes were enemies, and a nice purple snake would make a good snack before breakfast too. It did not occur to the 2-day-old dragon that Marcia's shoes were only the skin of a snake, or that the feet inside them belonged to an irritable and powerful wizard who had a particular fondness for her shoes, and no fondness whatsoever for baby dragons. A streak of glistening green shot across the floor, latched itself onto Marcia's right foot, and started chewing. "Ow!" yelled Marcia, frantically shaking her foot. But Spitfire had learned his lesson since Septimus had shaken him off his finger 2 days earlier. He hung on tight and sank his sharp little dragon teeth into the snakeskin. "Teeth release!" Marcia spluttered with some difficulty. Spitfire dug his teeth in harder. "Teeth release!" Marcia yelled. Spitfire hung on and gave the python's skin a good shake. "Teeth release!" Marcia shouted, getting it right at last. Spitfire let go of the purple python shoe, and as if purple snakeskin was now of no interest to him at all, the dragon sauntered back to Septimus's side, sat down, and regarded Marcia with a baleful expression. Marcia collapsed onto a chair, nursing her foot and gazing at her ruined shoe. Septimus and Jenna held their breath. What would she say? "I suppose, Septimus," said Marcia after a long pause, I suppose that pest has imprinted you? Yes, admitted Septimus. I thought so. She sighed heavily. It's not as if I don't have enough to worry about, Septimus. Do you know how big they get? I'm sorry, muttered Septimus. I promise I'll look after him. Really, I will. I'll feed him and housebreak him and exercise him and everything. She looked unimpressed. I didn't mean to get one, said Septimus gloomily. He hatched from Jenna's rock. Did he? Marcia calmed down a little. Did he really? A human hatching. Well, well, that's quite something. Anyway, he will have to stay in your room for the time being. I'm not having him messing up any more things. And, although Marcia did not want to tell Septimus, she did not want the impressionable dragon tainted by any contact with the shadow. If this was to be Septimus's companion, then it must be kept as free from dark magic as possible. Marcia insisted on hearing all the details of Jenna's escape from Simon, and when she was told about the flight of the dragon boat to the castle, she looked just a little triumphant. So I am now the keeper, she muttered. Septimus was surprised. I don't think so, he said. I'm sure Aunt Zelda is still the keeper. Nonsense, Marcia retorted. How can she be, stuck miles away out on those marshes? The dragon boat is here at the castle, and quite right, too. She's a sensible boat, that dragon. Well, this keeper won't let her down. Catchpole? Catchpole pushed the door open nervously. You called, Madam Marcia? He gulped. Yes, take 13 wizards down to the boatyard at once. They are to guard the dragon boat with their lives. Got that? 13 wizards, dragon boat. Guard with lives. Yes. Thank you, Madam Marcia. Will that be all? I should think that is quite enough for you to manage at one time, Catchpole. Oh, yes. Thank you, Madam Marcia. Oh, and Catchpole? Catchpole stopped his anxious retreat. Yes, Madam Marcia? When you've done that, you may join us for breakfast. Catchpole's face fell. Oh, he said, and then remembering his manners. Oh, thank you, Madam Marcia. Thanks so much. Breakfast was something of an ordeal for Catchpole. He sat awkwardly at the table, unsure of how to behave with Jenna and Septimus, let alone Marcia, who terrified him. I said keep the wizards out, Catchpole, not my apprentice. Can't you tell the difference? Marcia told him crossly, while the stove let the coffee boil over for the second time that week. The stove was never at its best in the morning, and it always felt tense and anxious at breakfast. It was not helped by the fact that the coffee pot was upset at being shouted at, and was not concentrating on the job at hand. To top it all off, there was a dragon chewing one of its feet. There was a loud hiss as the coffee hit the stove's hot plate and spilled onto the floor. Clean, snapped Marcia. A cloth leaped off the sink and quickly mopped up the mess. Catchpole ate very little breakfast. He sat twisting his plaid hat in his hands, looking anxiously at Spitfire, who was in the corner by the stove, loudly gulping down great mouthfuls of porridge. After breakfast, which for Spitfire was 2 roast chickens, 3 loaves of bread, a bucket of porridge, a tablecloth, a gallon of water, and Catchpole's hat, Septimus, Jenna, and Catchpole sat at the table and listened to the sounds of Marcia taking the dragon upstairs, pushing it into Septimus's room, and barricading the door. There was an awkward silence around the table. Catchpole sat holding a pair of damp, detachable ear-flaps from his hat, which Spitfire had coughed up shortly after he had snatched the hat from Catchpole's grasp and swallowed it. Jenna stood up. Excuse me, she said, but I think I'd better get back to Mum and Dad now. You coming too, Sep? Maybe later, Jen. I'll see what Marcia wants me to do first. I'll tell you what I want you to do, said Marcia, coming back into the kitchen, somewhat disheveled. You are to go straight down to the manuscriptorium and get a copy of the Drax Dragon Training Manual. You want the original Wizard Fireproof edition. Don't let them put you off with the cheap paper one. It won't last 5 minutes. It's all right, said Septimus airily. I've got this. He waved his copy of How to Survive Dragon Fostering, a Practical Guide. That rubbish? Marcia snorted. Where on earth did you get that? Aunt Zelda gave it to me, muttered Septimus, and she said I should get the Winged Lizard's Almanac of the Early Years. Marcia finished his sentence for him. That's a load of rubbish, too. Anyway, you won't find any of those, as they were printed on some very flammable paper. It has to be Drax, Septimus. Nothing else will do. To the accompaniment of some ominous thumps coming from Septimus's bedroom, Jenna and Septimus made a hasty exit from the extraordinary wizard's rooms, and set off in search of Drax. Jenna and Septimus walked along Wizard Way, half expecting a black horse and rider to appear again, but all seemed perfectly normal. It was mid-morning by now. The sun shone down between a few drifting white clouds, and the way was busy with clerks on important errands, or looking as if they were, and shoppers browsing through the stacks of books and parchments laid out on tables outside the shops. "What's up with Marcia?" asked Jenna, as they neared the manuscriptorium. "She's even more grumpy than usual." "I know," said Septimus unhappily. "I think the shadow is beginning to take her over. I wish there was something I could do." "Look, Sep," said Jenna, concerned. "Maybe you should stay with us at the palace for a while." "Thanks, Jen," replied Septimus, "but I can't leave Marcia alone with that awful shadow following her around. She needs me." Jenna smiled. She knew Septimus would say that. "Well, if it gets too horrible with Marcia, you must come straight to the palace and tell Mum. Promise." "Promise." Septimus gave her a hug. "Bye, Jen. Say hello to Mum and Dad from me. Tell them I'll come and see them later." He watched Jenna carry on up the way toward the palace until she had safely reached the gate. Then he pushed open the manuscriptorium door with its familiar ping and walked into the dingy front office. "Watcha, Sep?" A cheery voice came from under the desk. "Hello, Beetle." Septimus grinned. "What can I do for you, oh wise apprentice?" Beetle's head appeared above the edge of the desk. "Hey, you couldn't do me a quick find spell, could you? I've lost old Foxy's best pen. He's back there having a blue fit." "Well, I shouldn't really." "Oh, here, use my magnet." Septimus took a small red magnet out of his apprentice belt and handed it to Beetle. "Hold that with the open end pointing to where you think the pen might be, and then think hard about the pen. You need to be quite close, though. The magnet's not very strong. I'll be getting a better one when I've finished my Finders-Seekers project." "Thanks, Sep." Beetle took the magnet and disappeared back under the desk. A few moments later he emerged triumphantly with a slim black pen stuck on the end of it. "Saved my bacon, Sep. Thanks." Beetle gave Septimus back his magnet. "You come down for anything special? Can I get you anything?" I need the Drax Dragon Training Manual, if you've got one. Wizard Waterproof, Wizard Fireproof, Wizard Advanced, Talking Print or Moving Pictures, Deluxe or Economy Edition, green or red cover, new or used, big or—" "Wizard Fireproof," interrupted Septimus. "Please." Beetle sucked his breath. Tricky. Don't know if we've got that one." "But you said—" "Well, of course, in theory we've got 'em, but in practice we haven't. The Drax is very rare, Sep. Most of 'em got eaten pretty quick, or burned, except for the Wizard Fireproof, I suppose." Then, seeing Septimus's look of disappointment, Beetle whispered, "Here, seeing as it's you, I'll let you into the Wild Book and Charm store. That's where it will be, if we have one. You can have a look for yourself. Follow me." Septimus squeezed past the large desk, and glancing around to check no one had seen them, Beetle unlocked a tall, narrow door, concealed in the wooden paneling that lined the outer office. Beetle pushed the door open, which Septimus noticed was lined with heavy planks, and put his finger to his lips. "Gotta keep the noise down, Sep. Not meant to be in here. Don't make any sudden movements, okay?" Septimus nodded and followed Beetle into the Wild Book and Charm store. Beetle closed the door behind them, and Septimus caught his breath. He felt as if he were back in the forest, surrounded by wolverines all over again. The Wild Book and Charm store was dimly lit and feral smelling. It consisted of 2 long lines of towering parallel shelves fronted with iron bars, behind which the wild books were crowded together. As Septimus cautiously followed Beetle along the narrow aisle, he was followed by a chorus of low growls, scratchings, and rustlings, as the books jostled behind the rusty bars. "Excuse the mess," whispered Beetle, scooping up an assorted pile of ripped and teeth-marked charms, which had lumps of fur stuck to them, and were covered in what looked like to Septimus like bud stains. "Had a bit of a punch-up last night between the charms from an Hermione Aardvark enchantment guide and Wolverine hex pamphlet. Some idiot who doesn't know their alphabet put them together. Not a pretty sight. Now let me see. Dinosaurs, Drosophila. No, that's too far. Ah, dragons. Should be here if we've got any. You have a look and see what you find. I'll just go and check no one's looking for me up front. Don't want anyone to get suspicious." With that, Beetle scuttled off, leaving Septimus surrounded by fur, feathers, and scales. Holding his nose tightly, partly to keep out the smell, but also because he felt a huge sneeze coming on, Septimus peered into the gloom, hoping to see something with Drax written on it. The books did not like being stared at. They shifted about, and one or two of the larger, more hairy ones emitted low, threatening growls, but was no sign of the Dracs or anything to do with dragons at all. Septimus was looking through the bars at a scaly book with no name on it, when Beetle tapped him on the shoulder. "Ah!" yelled Septimus. "Shh!" hissed Beetle. "Your brother's here." "What's Nico want? Did he say?" "Not Nico. Simon."